As it turns out, everyone has two working geniuses, areas where they get their joy and their energy, two working competencies, things they can do well. It doesn't necessarily feed them, but they're okay, and two working frustrations where they don't get joy and energy. The best way I like to describe this is to think of the analogy of putting coffee into a container. Your working genius is like taking coffee and pouring it into a thermos and putting a lid on top. It is going to hold that heat for a long, long time. We can do things in our working genius for a long time and never really get tired. It energizes us and it feeds us. Then we have our working competencies. That's like pouring coffee into a cup, not putting a lid on it. It's going to hold that heat for a while, but eventually it's going to dissipate and go cold. Okay. Your working frustration is like pouring coffee into a cup that has a hole in the bottom. It's going to disappear right away. It's not going to hold that heat at all. And that's what we have to think about when we think about our working geniuses, our working competencies, and our working frustrations. Now, that doesn't mean all of us aren't going to, at times, have to do things in our frustrations. But if we're having to do it very often, it's going to crush us. It doesn't mean we're not going to have to do a lot in our working competencies from time to time, but that's not going to necessarily feed us. The more we can do in our areas of working genius, the more we're going to hold our energy and our passion and our joy. So while there are 6 types of working genius, there's actually 3 stages of work. 2 of the geniuses fall into each stage. In fact, we came up with these stages before we discovered the 6 geniuses. The first stage, which involves the first 2 geniuses, wonder and invention, is what we call ideation. That makes sense, coming up with new ideas. Somebody wonders, why are things like this? And somebody says, I have a great idea. I have a solution to that. That's ideation. The last 2 are enablement and tenacity, and that constitutes the third stage, which is implementation. Okay, I'm gonna agree to help, and we're gonna get it across the finish line. First stage, ideation. Last stage, implementation. Now, you might wonder why I didn't cover the second stage second, and that's because this is one that's often misunderstood and overlooked. Many people think we go from ideation, you throw it over the wall, and somebody implements it. But there's a stage in the middle 2 geniuses, discernment and galvanizing, constitute what we call activation. After you ideate something, you need to actually decide to activate it by discerning whether it's going to work and making tweaks, and then getting people excited. And only then, after activation is completed, can you effectively move on to implementation. So those are the 3 stages of work: ideate, activate, implement. And that's how they break down according to the 6 types of working genius. Let's do an overview of the 6 types of working genius. But before we do that, let's remember that this is certainly a tool for individuals to apply where they get their joy and their energy in work. We like to say this is 20% of an individual personality-like assessment, if you will. But it's also the 6 steps, the 6 activities involved in doing any kind of work. So it's actually 80% productivity tool. So let's go through the 6 types now. The first working genius is the genius of wonder. This is a person who gets energy from pondering things, asking questions, contemplating. They're always wondering, why are things the way they are? Is there a better way? Is this the most potential we could achieve? People with the genius of wonder often don't think of it as a genius at all. They just do it naturally, but in fact, it's the first step in any kind of work. Somebody has to say, why is it this way? And should we be doing it differently? The genius of wonder. That provokes the second genius, the genius of invention. The person with the genius of invention loves to come up with new ideas out of nothing. They like to invent, of course, and they really like to come up with novel, new ways of solving problems. So they take whatever somebody is wondering about and they say, that's a good question. Let me try to solve it. Let me come up with something novel and new that can solve that problem. This is the second stage of work. The third stage, the third genius, is the genius of discernment. This is really important. The person with this genius takes that idea that the inventor came up with and says, let me evaluate it. These people have great instincts, gut feel, intuition. They think in patterns and integrative ways. It's not linear and it's not based on expertise. They're those people that just know how to look at something and have a really good and accurate sense of whether it's going to work or not. And they work very closely with the inventor. They go back and forth, inventing an idea, assessing it, and discerning it. Go back and forth until the discerner says, yes, this is ready to go. Then comes the fourth genius and the fourth step, which is galvanizing. There are people in life that get their energy and their joy out of rallying people, inspiring them, getting people in a room and saying, this is a great idea and we need everybody's help. Let's do it. So they're the people who actually love to inspire and organize and get people moving. The fifth type of working genius is enablement. Now, this is a critical one that people often don't think of as a genius, but they're the ones that respond to the galvanizer and say, if you think this is a great idea and I know you need help, I will provide that help. In fact, I'll probably be able to anticipate what people need, and I'll provide that help in the way they need it, on their terms. This is absolutely a genius. Sometimes people that have this think they're just nice or they conform well, but it's such a critical genius on any team, the genius of enablement. And the final genius, the final step in any piece of work, is the genius of tenacity. And this is people who get joy and energy out of finishing things, crossing them off the list, making sure they've hit the standards, and that it's going to accomplish exactly what they want it to accomplish. This is critical because this is how we ensure that things are actually going to get done. So there's 6 working geniuses and 6 steps in any kind of work. It begins with wonder, and then invention, and then discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. One of the ways we like to explain the 6 types of working genius is to use analogies that have to do with elevation or altitude. So we like to think about like a group of friends who has a private plane, wouldn't that be nice? And they're out on an excursion across the United States. And at some point, one of them exercises the genius of wonder. Now, this happens at the highest altitude, at 30,000 feet. And they say, hey, do you think we should take a break? Do you think we should stop at some point? And that's just asking the question. That's all they're doing. It's a very responsive thing. It's like, it feels like maybe we need to take a break. The genius of invention comes down to 25,000 feet, and they say, oh, I have an idea. We should go to Yosemite, and we should land the plane there, because there's a lot of fun things to do. And then somebody says, the discernment person comes down a little closer to the ground, and they say, you know, it's March. It's probably still snowing there. And so I don't think that airport might even be open. And even if it is, there's probably no planes going there. I don't know if they're going to have any services for us or even any fuel. And so they kind of bump it back up to the 25,000 feet, and the inventor goes, you're right, let's go to Carmel. They have an airport there. There's probably a lot of people there. I've been there before. That'll be fun. There's stuff to do, and they'll have all the services. And the discerner goes, better idea. Now that they've discerned it, the plane's coming down to 20,000 feet. Now the galvanizer says, hey, everybody, we're down to 15,000 feet. Let's make sure that we're prepared to do this. We're going to need somebody to radio ahead to make sure that they know we're coming. Somebody else has to make sure what services they've got there. We got to order ahead. We need to make sure that the runway is ready for us. Let's all rally to do this. The plane is starting to go down. The enablement person says, got it. I'll take care of runway and control tower. And then somebody else says, they have enablement. I'll take care of the services in the area and figure out what we're going to do. Now we're getting close to the ground. And the person with tenacity says, buckle your seatbelts. I'm going to actually land this plane. Let's make sure that the wheels are down. They're dealing with the most practical things near the ground. That's kind of how any piece of work works. Somebody up here says, what about this? Invent, discern, galvanize, enable, tenacity lands that plane. Here's the difficult thing. For instance, I love invention and discernment. So I live at 25 and 20,000 feet. Well, I will take any conversation and gear it up toward that. Well, sometimes you got to land the plane. That's probably not my thing, but if I don't realize that, I'll constantly be trying to pull the plane up. Other people, they love landing planes, but they're going to be constantly focused on the tactics of that, and they're going to need help from people a little bit higher in the process. Now, why is that important? Because when we go from 25,000 feet to 5,000 feet in one conversation and back up to 25,000 feet, people get sick. You get airsick, everything gets destabilized. We have to do these things in the right kind of sequence and understand where we are. Imagine you're just about to land that plane in Carmel and somebody says, I have a better idea. Let's go to Tahoe. And the plane goes way up here. That happens at work a lot. It's really important to understand where our elevation is, what part of the process we're in, so we can make that plane decisions, preparation, and landing as smooth as possible.